Good afternoon. I'm based in Silicon Valley, and I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm going to share about 15 or 20 minutes of insights related to going into new markets. And most of the startups and scale-ups that I've worked with around the world have a big vision for where they're going to go in the future. But there's lots of challenges associated with that, whether you're here going to there or you're there coming here. There's all kinds of things that make the job really complicated for startups. So I'll start off with asking, why are you expanding into a new market? Where are you going, and what are the reasons behind that? Did you get a few inquiries, or is the local market too small, or are your adjacent markets too small? What are the reasons that you're going into new markets? And so when you look at the inquiries that you've gotten, what is the quality of those leads? Do they map or mirror what you've been doing in your home market, or are they completely different? Are they sectors outside where you've been successful so far? What are some of the common themes or commonalities between these new leads and your existing leads? So those are kind of the first questions that I like to ask founders when they tell me they want to move into a new market. The thing that I see most often with the thousands of startups I've worked with is there's simply not enough research done on the new markets before they get on a plane and travel there. They don't do enough informational interviews to really understand what are the challenges in the market that that group of customers is facing today. And they don't necessarily understand the expectations in that new geography for customer installation, service, support, etc. And they're not, the founders are not really sure exactly who are the thought leaders and the key influencers that they should be talking to understand some of the nuances and subtleties of those new markets. And certainly there's business style differences, there's local language, there's cultural differences, there's biases that play into moving into a new market. And of course, legal, taxation, regulatory, licensing, all those things can become very, very costly if you don't do enough homework. And so I like to recommend that companies really do a tremendous amount of research before they go, find some local people that can help validate their assumptions on that market, and then build a plan that has very conservative key performance indicators. One thing I like to suggest is if you've got inquiries that are coming into your company, can you convert them to customers and then convert them to your local market advisors? So how can they play a role in helping you to shape your plan with respect to your go-to-market strategy, your messaging and positioning strategy, how you're going to basically service, support your customers, et cetera. So I think this is a really good approach to helping founders understand and find ways to gather more insight about their local market. So take your inquiries, turn them into customers, and then ask them if they'll be local market advisors for you. So the challenging thing is preserving your capital and preserving your sanity as a founder. If you're going into a new geography that's on a completely different continent, and since I'm based in Silicon Valley, I see a lot of founders come from every country around the world. It's really expensive to get on the plane and spend a week there. On average, it's about 3,500 euro, and that could be a salary for a couple months for somebody here in Europe. So you've got to be very careful about how you spend your money, and it takes more than a week generally to make the right kinds of contacts. A friend of mine, who's now a friend of mine, he worked for an Estonian company that was expanding into the US, and he planned 6 months to be in Silicon Valley to network with all the proper people and companies in his target audience. And I talked to him at the second week, at the fourth week, and by the fifth week, he had started making all the right connections because it takes time to network to all the people you need to get to. You'll get a contact, no, that's not me, but let me connect you to this guy over here in the company. Not me, maybe somebody over here. And so it takes time to build your network and get connected to the right people. So by the time his plane was supposed to be taking off, he'd made connections to all the right people, but it took him 6 weeks to build his network in Silicon Valley. I want to caution you about avoiding what we call the confirmation trap, which is essentially you looking for data or data points or insights that validate your own hypothesis about a market. And so try to be as open-minded as you can when you're talking to people in that market. Try not to form a hypothesis about how the market behaves, what your product should look like, what your price points are, et cetera, et cetera. Try to be as open-minded as possible. And use the technology tools that we've got out there, because they're very good about helping you to build that one-on-one rapport and relationship without having to get on a plane. The thing about preserving your sanity is I see a lot of Australian entrepreneurs, for example. Australia is a big country, big landmass, few people, and few companies. So Australian entrepreneurs, which are very innovative, they come to Silicon Valley, and they're still managing their job and their responsibilities in Australia and then trying to sell full-time in Silicon Valley. So they end up running these 20-hour-long days, and after a few weeks, you can see burnout in the founders. So I would encourage you to think very carefully about how you're going to manage the two disparate time zones. And try to, if things are going right in the new market, try to do what we call planned obsolescence in the home market. So make yourself, basically obsolete yourself in your home market so you can focus on what you need to, which are sales, business development, and partnerships in the new market. So when you're going into a new market, you can do kind of the all-in, which is basically a lot of money. Most startups don't have it. But you can invest a lot of money. You can relocate members of your team there and make a strong commitment to that particular market. You can do what I call kind of toe in the water, which is a partial investment, meaning somebody's responsible for that territory. There's a little bit of financial resources available to it, and somebody gets on a plane on some regular frequency and goes to that new market after they've set up a pretty tight agenda of appointments and that sort of thing. And then there's managing the other market from a distance, using all the tools and technology. And that is indeed possible, depending on the type of business, depending on the expectations of your customer, but you really can manage sales in other geographies just by using all the technology and tools that we have today. Your products don't sell themselves. How do they get to market? Is it direct, indirect? Are there different sort of systems integrators, partners, resellers? How do you make contact with those guys? And generally, the answers to these questions come from your customers. This goes back to your customers want to be served, supported, and basically loved in a certain way. So they're going to tell you who their best partners are and who you should be doing business with. But you've got to be thinking about that from the perspective of how do I enter the market most efficiently and most effectively. My recommendation is only start with one vertical. Even though you have perhaps leads and inquiries coming from different sectors, I recommend you just focus on one vertical initially because it helps you do a better job in understanding the tendencies of the market, the new market, and it'll help you do a better job in focusing your messaging, your marketing, and all your resources back at the home office. So start with one, move into two, but make sure that you've got the right timing on that. And speaking of timing, you've got to look at when is the right time to enter that market. And there's a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley who's very fond of saying, too early, too early, too early, too early, just right, too late. And that's usually how it goes. You're either investing a lot of time and energy and evangelizing the value of your solution in the market. So you're there early, you're talking to customers, you're sort of setting the stage, building the expectations of the market, and you spend a lot of time and energy doing that only to have one of your competitors come in a little bit later and take advantage of all the work that you've done. So you've got to be very careful about what is the timing that you take and how do you go into the market and what is your key differentiation. So are you clear on your differentiation against the competition? Do you understand exactly what's happening in the market there locally? Can you get sufficient data points from your local market advisors, i.e. your initial customers? Can they tell you enough about what's happening there for you to be comfortable that, yes, in fact, you are differentiated in the marketplace and it does give you a competitive advantage to build a robust business? How do you manage your existing tasks at your headquarters? At what point in time are you going to sort of disconnect from those, pass those tasks on to someone else on the team, and allow yourself to fully focus on the new market? I'm always surprised when entrepreneurs don't really have these discussions inside the founding team. They're really focused on, we just got to go, we've got to close some deals, et cetera, et cetera. But they're not really looking at the fact that, for example, between here and Silicon Valley, for example, there's 9 hours difference. Certain times of the year, there's 6 hours difference between Brazil and Silicon Valley, depending on the time of year. But you've got to be realistic and looking at how much an individual can realistically do and how they maintain their sanity, their health, et cetera, and become an effective representative for the company in the sales process. You're going to have OSMs. Do you guys know what those are? Those are oh shit moments. Okay, this is when you suddenly wake up and go, oh shit, things are not quite working exactly the way that we thought. Or there's a brand new competitor in the market. So this is pretty much a common sort of thing that I see with founders. And I do a lot of talks, and I always ask founders, so how many of you guys have ever had an OSM? And yeah, every hand will go up in the room. How many of you guys have had one OSM every month? Every hand will go up. How about every week? The other day I was talking to some Brazilian guys, and he says, I have about 4 of those every morning. So that makes me wonder about him and how he, what he does and what he considers an OSM. But you're going to have these. There's no question about it. You're going to be, if you're an entrepreneur, you've basically committed to taking risk. And taking risk means failure. So you can do small failures by doing tiny tests, A versus B and B versus C. Or you can de-risk the situation as much as possible and hope that you don't have a lot of these OSMs. But I guess to say, kind of to wrap up for you guys, is you've got to do more homework entering a new market than you ever thought possible. You've got to have people on the ground that are willing to, that love you and support you and your technology and are willing to give you insights and information about how you can be more effective in your market entry strategy. So I guess my big lesson to you guys is do more than you think is necessary, because you can never have too many insights about a new market. Figure out who your market advisors are. My advice would be take those inquiries, convert them to customers, and turn them into network advisors, your market advisors. They're very valuable. Maintain your sanity, preserve your capital, figure out how long you can avoid getting on a plane and spending a couple €1,000 to go and travel and what have you. Start with one vertical, and then rebound from your OSMs as quickly as you can. Finally, the last piece of advice is really manage expectations. So expectations with your investors, expectations with your team, and expectations with the market about how you're going to go forward and serve and support the product. So those are sort of my tips and my insight for go-to-market strategies. We've got just a couple of minutes here if anybody's got any questions. Not a single question. I can't hear.
Yeah, we don't have a microphone. So
Okay.
as I told you before, if you want to talk, we can't hear you, man. So if you want to give some questions. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, my book? Well, I did write the book Decoding Silicon Valley, The Insider's Guide, specifically because people tend to come into Silicon Valley, founders come into Silicon Valley with a lot of misconceptions. And so this book is available in hard physical book, or it's available on Kindle. It's designed to really help you understand a lot of the business network and the ecosystem in Silicon Valley, in addition to what investors expect there and some strategies and tactics for how do you go into the market there, specifically calling on corporate customers and that sort of thing. So I'll recommend my book.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you so
very
much.
much.